Welcome to the channel, The Tragic Case of Alicia Canales Maguire. In today's deep dive into true crime, we look at a heartbreaking case of mistaken identity from Everett, Washington, that occurred on September 20, 2017.
Today we're going to talk about what happened in Everett, Washington. Around 1:55 a.m. on September 20th, 2017, several people called 911 after hearing loud bangs coming from a quiet neighborhood. When police arrived about 10 minutes later, they were met with a scene no one ever expects to see. Lying just outside the front door was 24-year-old Alicia Canales Maguire. She had been shot, and sadly, she was already gone. Investigators would later piece together what happened using social media activity and nearby CCTV footage, key details that helped solve this heartbreaking case. Alicia was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. For most of her adult life, she worked as a caregiver. It wasn't just a job to her. She genuinely loved taking care of people and was always looking for ways to help others. She grew up on a farm and started working when she was just 5 years old. Hard work was part of her daily life from an early age, and even as an adult, she often returned to the family farm to help out whenever she could. Family meant everything to Alicia. She talked to them often, visited whenever possible, and never ended a conversation without saying, "I love you." She lived in Birdsview with her husband, Bradley. The two had married just 2 months earlier, in July of 2017, during a beautiful beach ceremony at Deception Pass. They were newly married, full of plans, and excited about starting a family together. That's why investigators quickly noticed something important. Alicia didn't live at the house where she was killed. The home belonged to her sister, Amanda Canales, who lived there with her 3 children. Amanda had traveled to New York for work and had asked Alicia to stay behind and help take care of the kids while she was gone. Alicia didn't hesitate. She loved her nieces and nephew and was happy to step in. There was also a live-in nanny staying at the house that night. She was one of the people who called 911. She later told police that she woke up to the sound of gunshots. When she went downstairs to see what was happening,
She found Alicia lying at the front door, not moving. When officers arrived, their first priority was to secure the house. They needed to make sure the person responsible wasn't still inside. They carefully searched every room and confirmed that only the nanny and Amanda's children were present. Once the frightened children were safely taken out of the house, investigators began focusing on the scene itself. A car was parked directly in front of the home, and shell casings were found beside it. That detail suggested the shooter had been standing next to the car when the shots were fired. Several bullets had struck the door frame just before the entrance, and Alicia was found lying face down right outside the door. Those small details would soon become crucial in understanding exactly what happened that night. It didn't look like a robbery. Nothing inside the house was disturbed, and there were no signs that the shooter had even stepped inside. That raised a bigger question. Who would want to kill Alicia, and why? When detectives confirmed the home belonged to her sister, Amanda, their thinking shifted. They started to wonder if this was a case of mistaken identity. Maybe Alicia wasn't the intended target. Maybe Amanda was, but she was in New York at the time. Once the nanny had calmed down, investigators sat with her and asked what she knew. Did she see the person who fired the shots? Did she know anyone who might want to hurt Alicia? The nanny told them she had been upstairs when she heard the gunshots. When she came downstairs, she saw Alicia lying face down near the front door, not moving. She never saw the shooter. Panicked, she called 911. She also told police that as far as she knew, Alicia's relationship with her husband Bradley was a good one. There hadn't been any problems that stood out. But the nanny did give detectives their first real lead. She mentioned that Amanda had ongoing issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. When detectives reviewed reports from the local sheriff's office, that detail stood out. This wasn't the first time police had been called to that address. Every previous call involved arguments between Amanda and Kevin. That pattern caught their attention. They tracked down Kevin Lewis's address in another part of Everett and went there before dawn. His house was dark. When they knocked, Kevin answered the door, appearing as though he had just woken up. During the conversation, officers asked him if he knew where his ex-wife was. Kevin replied that she should be at home. Detectives then asked where he had been that night. Kevin said he'd stayed home and that his sister and mother could confirm it. What struck the detectives was what he didn't do. He never asked why they were there. When they told him there had been a shooting at the house where his children lived, he showed no reaction. He didn't ask if the kids were okay. He didn't ask any questions at all. Then, detectives told him that Amanda was actually out of town on business. Kevin looked surprised and said, "Really?" That's where the conversation ended, but the encounter left investigators with more concerns than answers. As detectives continued working the case, they walked the street and noticed something important. Two neighboring houses had surveillance cameras that could help them check Kevin Lewis's claim that he'd stayed home all night. When they reviewed the footage, they saw something that didn't line up with his story. About 40 minutes before Alicia was shot, a car pulled up near Kevin's driveway. A short time later, a man who looked very similar to Kevin stepped out of the house, walked toward the car, and got inside. Moments after that, the car drove away. The video quality wasn't clear enough to say for sure that it was Kevin, but the timing stood out. Investigators then checked footage from a second camera nearby. This angle gave them a better look at the car, though it still wasn't enough to identify the make or model. All they could tell was that it was light-colored. They fast-forwarded through the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. That's when they noticed a small but critical detail. 3 of the car's rims were light-colored, but the front right rim was dark. The car stopped again near Kevin's house. The same person seen earlier got out and went back inside. Whoever this man was, he entered the house roughly 20 minutes before the first 911 calls about a shooting began. After that, the car drove away and didn't return. It's about a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's home. That meant the timing worked, but at that point, investigators couldn't say for sure whether the car was connected to the shooting at all. It was still too early to draw conclusions. A few hours later, Amanda learned what had happened. She was in New York when her father called and told her that Alicia was dead. Alicia had just gotten married. She was happy, making plans and talking about having children of her own. Now her family was left trying to process the loss. When investigators asked Amanda if she believed her ex-husband could have been responsible for Alicia's death, she didn't hesitate. She said she had no doubt it was Kevin. Even after their 8-year marriage ended, Amanda struggled to fully talk about how bad things had been. She and Kevin shared 3 young children, 2 girls and a boy, and had spent nearly a decade together. But Amanda had been deeply unhappy, and even after their divorce in June of 2017, she lived in fear of him. Kevin had physically hurt her in the past, leaving visible bruises, and despite the separation, the threats never stopped. In August of 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of her children. Instead of traditional child support, Kevin Lewis was ordered to pay $800 a month. For Amanda, it felt like a fresh start. She focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and as a single mother, she leaned heavily on the support of her family. But Kevin didn't let go. Amanda told investigators that Kevin had threatened to kill her. He was a former member of the military, and she took those threats seriously. She believed she was the intended target that night and that her sister died in her place. Amanda eventually filed for a restraining order. But Kevin violated it repeatedly. He showed up outside her house, walked around the property, and looked through the windows. It terrified Amanda and deeply frightened their 3 children. Despite the repeated violations, none of them led to Kevin being formally charged. Just weeks before Alicia was killed, Amanda was badly beaten in her own driveway. She had come home late one night and parked near the house. As she opened her car door, someone attacked her. It happened so quickly that she never got a clear look at the person's face, but she said she had no doubt who was responsible. Given everything investigators had learned, 30-year-old Kevin Lewis quickly became the main suspect in Alicia Canales Maguire's murder. Detectives believed he'd gone there intending to kill Amanda. They also believed he didn't know she was in New York at the time, or that Alicia had stepped in to care for the children while Amanda was away. Still, there were problems with that theory. If the man seen on the surveillance footage really was Kevin, then he appeared to be at his own home around the time of the shooting. On top of that, both his sister and his mother backed up his claim that he was home that night. Because of those inconsistencies, investigators kept an open mind and continued exploring other possibilities. They returned to Amanda's house and re-examined the scene in detail. By analyzing the bullet paths, experts concluded that Alicia was shot while the front door was partially open. At least 7 shots were fired, all coming from outside the home and traveling inward. The evidence suggested the shooter first fired while standing near the garage, then moved closer to the front door and fired again through the doorway. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death: multiple gunshot wounds to Alicia's head and torso. Alicia was hit by 5 bullets. 2 of the wounds showed gunpowder stippling,
which told the medical examiner that at least some of the shots were fired from close range. During testimony, the examiner explained that it wasn't possible to determine the exact order of the 5 shots, but said the final 2 gunshot wounds to the head were likely the last ones inflicted. Experts also confirmed that all 7 shell casings recovered at the scene came from the same firearm. The close-range head wounds raised another question for investigators. Did anyone have a personal reason to want Alicia dead? They explored that possibility but found no evidence to support it. The shell casings themselves became an important clue. The brand stood out because it wasn't commonly used. They were Russian-made cartridges under the Tool Ammo brand. Because the brand was relatively uncommon, investigators hoped it might be easier to track down where the ammunition had been sold and possibly who bought it. That led them to Walmart. Detectives learned that Walmart carried that specific type of 9mm Tool Ammo ammunition, and one of the stores was located close to the crime scene. Store representatives told police that a man had recently purchased that exact ammunition and that the transaction had been captured on CCTV. Investigators went to the store to review the footage. The purchase was made on September 18th, just 2 days before Alicia was killed. At first, detectives thought the buyer might be Kevin Lewis, but it wasn't. The man in the video wasn't Kevin. He paid with a credit card, which allowed police to identify him. When they looked into his background, they found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alicia, Amanda, or the nanny. Once again, investigators were back at square one. With no new leads from the ammunition trail, detectives went back to Amanda, hoping she could provide more insight into Kevin and their past. Amanda explained that in the beginning, the relationship seemed normal. During the early years, Kevin kept his temper in check. She never expected that over time he would become more controlling, then aggressive, and eventually violent. Their relationship ended in divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. And even through her grief, Amanda remained convinced of one thing: Alicia was not the person meant to die that night. She believed it was a tragic case of mistaken identity. Amanda was convinced the bullets were meant for her. She told police that Kevin had somehow arranged the attack. Still, there was one major problem with that theory. Kevin appeared to be at home when the shooting happened. Because of that, investigators went back and reviewed the surveillance footage again, this time more carefully. That's when they noticed something they hadn't caught before. In the grainy video, the man believed to be Kevin walks out of his house, approaches the car, and gets into the back seat directly behind the driver. That raised an obvious question. Why wouldn't he sit in the front passenger seat? After looking at it more closely, investigators came to a possible explanation. Someone may have already been sitting in the front passenger seat. That would mean the car likely had at least 2 people inside when it pulled up to Kevin's house,
and Kevin, or the man who looked like him, had no choice but to sit in the back. Even with that possibility, police still didn't have direct evidence tying Kevin to Alicia's murder. What they did have was clear evidence of his past assaults and threats against Amanda. Based on that, Kevin was arrested. In November 2018, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. By then, more than a year had passed since Alicia's death, and her murder remained unsolved. The case finally took a turn in 2019 when police received a call from a woman who said she had information that could be important. She told detectives about a young woman living in Spokane who had been at a party and openly bragged about being hired to kill someone on York Road, the same street where Alicia was shot. At first, investigators weren't sure what to make of it. Spokane is about 5 hours from Everett. Still, the caller explained that she met this woman at a party where she introduced herself as Angelica. According to the caller, Angelica talked about how she and her boyfriend had carried out the shooting. She said the victim had been shot in the head, that they fired from around the corner, and that they were hired by the children's father. She also claimed they killed the wrong person, that it was a case of mistaken identity. Police had never released those details publicly. Only investigators and Alicia's family knew that she had been shot in the head. That immediately got detectives' attention. As they dug deeper, investigators learned that Angelica was not her real name. Her actual name was Alexis Hale. When they looked into her social media accounts, they found photos of her posing with a 9mm handgun, possibly the same type of weapon used in the crime. At that point, the case finally had a new direction. Investigators also noticed that in several of the videos on Alexis's social media, a man appeared in the background. That man was her boyfriend, Jaredon Phelps. On the night Alicia was killed, Alexis Hale posted a video filmed through a car's windshield. She appeared to be talking about road signs as the car moved. By studying the signs and surroundings, investigators were able to pinpoint the car's location at that moment. It was about a 10-minute drive from Kevin Lewis's house. In another video posted just hours after Alicia's death, Jaredon Phelps was seen showing off a thick wad of cash. As detectives dug deeper into Phelps's social media, they noticed something else. One of the comments under his photo came from his aunt. When investigators clicked on her profile, they immediately recognized her. She was Kevin Lewis's mother. That connection made everything click. Jaredon Phelps was Kevin Lewis's cousin. At that point, police had enough to make arrests. Alexis Hale was the first to be taken into custody. As officers handcuffed her, she screamed that they couldn't arrest her because she was only 17 years old. She clearly understood why she was being arrested and immediately demanded a lawyer. Around the same time, police arrested Jaredon Phelps in another part of the city. Investigators pulled phone records from both Hale and Phelps, which showed they had traveled from Spokane to Everett around the time of the shooting. Surveillance footage from Kevin Lewis's neighborhood added another layer. It showed a man wearing a white top leaving Lewis's house at 11:13 p.m. and returning at 1:37 a.m. When police had spoken to Kevin after Alicia's death, he had been wearing a white top. Alexis refused to talk to investigators. Kevin Lewis, meanwhile, was already in prison, serving a 3-year sentence for assaulting Amanda. That made Jaredon Phelps their best chance at getting answers. Eventually, they did. Police obtained a confession along with confirmation of who had hired Hale and Phelps to carry out the shooting. Just as investigators had suspected, it was Kevin Lewis. They took Phelps back to the crime scene where he walked them through what happened and provided more details about the night Alicia was killed. Kevin Lewis, already behind bars on an unrelated charge, was formally arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with Alicia Canales Maguire's death in September 2017. In July 2020, Jaredon Phelps, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 31 years in prison. Alexis Hale, who was 18 at the time of her plea, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. At trial, Jared Phelps testified that he carried out the shooting for the money and the status it brought him. He told the court that he spent the money Kevin Lewis paid him on tattoos, a pair of Timberland boots, and a Ferrera Ma belt buckle. He also claimed that his former girlfriend had gotten the gun from a family member and that he gave her $200. Kevin Lewis pleaded not guilty and went to trial later that year. Prosecutors argued that Lewis had paid his cousin and his cousin's girlfriend a total of $2,400 to remove his ex-wife. They said he had turned two teenagers into hired killers and that in a tragic case of mistaken identity, it was Alicia who opened the door. Phelps testified that Lewis gave them directions to the house but said he didn't know the target's name, only the address. After the shooting, Phelps said Lewis handed him an envelope filled with cash. After dropping Lewis back at his home, Phelps and Alexis Hale drove to the address Lewis had pointed out. They parked nearby and got out of the car. Phelps stopped near the garage, while Hale walked toward the front door and knocked. When Alicia opened the door, Hale walked away. Phelps then fired the gun until it was empty. He told the court that he fired the first shots from his position near the garage, then walked closer and fired the last shots from the front porch. The gun crossed the doorway and the final shots struck Alicia in the neck and head. Phelps and Hale fled the scene, but later returned, worried they might have dropped a glove. When they saw police cars already there, they turned around and left. They pulled up GPS directions and drove back to Spokane. The defense argued that Lewis had never explicitly said the word kill. They claimed he had only told his cousin to get the target out of the way. Prosecutors pushed back hard. They pointed to Lewis's history of violence and the threats he had made against Amanda. This, they said, was a case about power and control, and the intent was clear. In court, Amanda called Kevin pure evil. She spoke about how he could play with their children, knowing they were inside the house the night she was supposed to die. "I thought you loved them," she said, "but someone who truly loved them would never put them in danger or leave them with that kind of trauma." She then asked a question that hung heavily in the courtroom. "Did you ever think about what would have happened if I had been home that night? That they would have woken up and found their own mother dead, lying in a pool of blood?" Amanda also spoke about what came after, about finding a safe home for her children, helping them heal and figuring out how to move forward despite everything that had been done to them. Turning to Kevin, she told him, "And in case you're wondering, they don't ask about you. They don't talk about you at all." In November 2021, after a 6-week trial, the jury needed less than 3.5 hours to reach a verdict. They found Kevin Lewis guilty of first-degree murder. In January 2022, at the age of 34, Kevin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Thompson also ordered that Lewis have no contact with his ex-wife, his children, or Jared Phelps and Alexis Hale for the rest of his life. According to prison records, Kevin Lewis remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. If this case grabbed your attention, give us a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my crime stories. I upload new cases every night. Stay alert, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next